State of the division for the NL East. This is for August 16th. I am Ryan Finkelstein, managing editor at Just Baseball. I got Aram, Leighton here, co-founder, and this division is heating up. Our top story we want to talk about before we get into anything else, though, is an article we just had that went live at justbaseball.com. Austin Riley is making his NL MVP case. Riley, once again, just like last season, having a monster second half. He stands right now, in my opinion, as the only real competition, I think, to Paul Goldschmidt in this race.
Yeah, if we had a healthy Bryce Harper, maybe.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is gone, unfortunately. And I agree. I mean, what Austin Riley's doing, we talked about it before. It's going to take a magical second half to dethrone Goldschmidt. And you know what? He's on his way so far through a magical second half. And not only that, they've got the narrative side of things too, right? The Braves are playing phenomenal baseball. And if they continue to just play really good ball, finish strong. I don't know if they're ever going to catch the Mets, right? That's going to be tough. But if they finish with a phenomenal record and Austin Riley's leading the way, which he has been, you got a pretty good case for this guy who has been probably, I would say, arguably the best hitter in baseball since the break. You're going to be hard pressed to find very many others. And I think you could go and check out the piece at justbaseball.com. Leo Morgenstern did a great job on that, really just breaking down the heroics, as he put it, in the second half from Riley.
And one of the really interesting sections he wrote about was his earned success. Basically, that the batted ball data is better on Riley than even a Paul Goldschmidt, that he hits the ball harder, and that his expected metrics are proving out even more than someone like Goldschmidt. Not to say that Goldschmidt is just, hitting 330 based on good fortune. He's been incredible this year, but it just shows that Austin Riley, what he's doing is sustainable because all of the data is telling us that it is, and that's going to lead to more success throughout the remainder of the season here.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple equation, right? Hit the ball hard, higher chance of that ball becoming a base hit. And
Yeah.
Goldschmidt hits the ball hard, but Austin Riley hits the ball harder. And if we're just talking about, just sheer likelihood of maintaining numbers, I think Austin Riley has a good chance, or if not a better chance, to maintain the numbers because the chase rates are not really any higher. He continues to get better at just commanding the strike zone, which has been a really impressive thing with Austin Riley in his development. And man, I would say that if I had to pick one, I'm going to pick the guy that's in front right now, right? I mean, that's the safer pick. But if we're talking about betting and odds and things like that, I did throw a $50 bet for transparency on Austin Riley at plus 1,200 a few weeks ago. It's plus 600 now. I'd still bet on that over, the minus 150 or whatever it is for Goldie. I think it's going to get much, much closer down the stretch, and we're going to see pretty close betting odds between the two of them. Should be a fun showdown.
It should be. And honestly, the other thing to think about is Goldschmidt might split some MVP votes with Nolan Arenado, who's actually leading the league in F4. But, kind of transitioning to some games we saw this weekend, your Marlins got destroyed by the Braves. And here is a team in Atlanta that was already rolling. They go through that series against the Mets where they obviously lose 4 or 5. And their response is, hey, you know what? Let's call up Vaughn Grissom. Let's just add another guy from Double-A. He hits the ground running.
Hardly. He played 20 games in Double-A. and this guy had multi-hit game basically every game of the series. He got on base 4 times in the last game of the series. He already has 2 home runs. He's fast. He plays good defense. The Braves continue to develop these guys. Talk about Michael Harris and what he did in that series.
Yeah.
Game-tying home run in the 9th. Clutch hits after clutch hits. Elite defense in center. They're pulling these dudes up from double who are playing huge parts in what they're doing right now at the big league level. And then they also brought guys up from AAA like it was their freaking practice squad, and they came up, shoved, and they sent them right back down. Kyle Muller came up, carved through the Marlins. Bryce Elder comes up, 10 Ks. Both those guys are back down to triple. Ian Anderson even came up, threw well, back down to triple. I mean, they are so deep right now and so focused on winning right now. So are the Mets and so are the Phillies. And it's refreshing. I love it. We're not babying prospects. We're not worried about service time. We're not afraid to bring guys up from triple to send them right back down. And I promise you, those guys are fine with it. They're fine with accruing, that or getting that big league paycheck for one day and then going back. It's fine with them. But I love the aggressiveness we're seeing from every team right now in the NL East, or at least the top 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing but I mean, honestly, watching the Phillies this weekend actually kind of opened my eyes a little bit because I haven't been paying that much attention to them other than kind of scoreboard watching. And the defense is considerably better now that you have Bryson Stott out there every day at shortstop. You have Marsh in center field. They're so much better up the middle, and that really does help. I mean, Nick Castellanos is still having a nightly adventure out there in right field. That's pretty brutal. But other than that, I mean, Alec Bohm made a great barehanded
Yeah,
play. I
he's getting
think that
better. It's Segura at second.
exactly. Segura at second. I really and honestly, Kyle Schwarber being out this weekend helped them defensively. Obviously, they'll get him back soon, but I really think that Stott and Bohm are kind of an interesting mix here on that same side of the infield to see them kind of progress and establish themselves as big leaders, and then adding the defense and center. I like what I see with the Phillies a little bit more, and to me, they're looking more and more like kind of that clear answer as a wild card team.
Yeah, it's funny because they had I think they just had a rough series, so they got punched in the mouth and kind of fell apart. Because then even the defense in that last game I was at on Sunday, Brandon Marsh kind of made a boneheaded play, which is
Yeah.
very unlike him. Overall, though, I think that's a big reason why they've had success. And even Edmundo Sosa off the bench is a guy that you can put in a defensive replacement up the middle as well. Like they have more defensively capable players, which is absolutely massive. But they clearly just were outmatched in this series. I know they snuck the first game out, right? But then the other two games to just one zip, DeGrom on the bump. But I don't know. I just didn't really get the sense that the Phillies were ever really had a shot there, even though Noah really kept them afloat. Noah was spectacular. And then, it was just kind of a boat race on Sunday. What I will say, though, is they hung in there at least in the DeGrom start. They snuck out the first one. And I think that the Mets, you're playing at Citi Field, sold out crowd. I think it's also a testament to the Phillies. They can only tread water for so long without Harper and now Schwarber. And that's the thing now is I think that's really going to hurt them offensively. I'm looking through the lineup. I'm like, who's going to step up for these guys right now? Maybe Hoskins here and there, maybe Real Muto, but you don't really have that guy that you fear in their lineup. And you're really feeling the loss of Schwarber compounded with Harper already out. And I think, it's going to be hard for them to put runs up if they don't get Schwarber back in the next week or so. And we know calf injuries kind of linger.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say that I came away this weekend is, outside of that last game where the Mets were able to score some runs against Zach Wheeler, the Phillies had great pitching from their starters
The
and
pitching
out
was
of their
phenomenal.
bullpen. So that now that pitching is really kind of showing out for them, I do think that this is a team that can string a lot of wins together. They got a really solid 1, 2, 3 in that rotation with Suarez, Nola, and Wheeler. We'll see if Syndergaard can give him some better starts. And those first couple have been bad, but if that rotation can be as good as it's been, and you do eventually get Schwarber back soon, and then hopefully Harper, yeah, that Phillies team to me looks pretty scary and looks better than those teams maybe in the Central with the Cardinals and the Brewers, who are maybe just going to be fighting it out to win that division.
Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to for the Phillies, we talked about it last time. Like the Mets have always this year, at least so far, what they've won 5 series against them.
They've
I think
destroyed them.
that
Yeah,
they've destroyed them. It is what it is. You got to beat the other teams. So you got the Reds for 3, you got the Mets for 4 again, which if you can split, fine. Then you get the Reds again for 4 more, and the Pirates for 3, and the D-backs for 3. I mean, you can put yourself in a really good spot whether or not you take care of the Mets. They squeezed one out against the Mets, even though it felt like a little bit more lopsided of a series after the last game. That probably, skewed me a little bit. But if they can even go 1 for 3 against the Mets and take care of business in the other dozen games against below 500 teams, they're kind of in the driver's seat going into the final month of the season here. And that's really all you can ask for without Schwarber and Harper, the defending MVP. Don't know exactly what the timeline is on both of those guys. The calf thing, it's tough. We saw it with Trout last year. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but obviously they're going to be pretty cautious with Schwarber. When they get those two guys back with what they've already added, are you scared of this team in the playoffs, or are we getting ahead of ourselves there? And like, really, they should just be happy to squeeze out a wild card spot.
I think that as far as from a Mets perspective, would I be scared of facing them? No. I think what we just saw is we saw the Mets kind of withstand the best punch they could with just the pitching that the Phillies had, and they proved to be the better team as they have all year. So I think that the Mets are clearly ahead of the Phillies right now. I think the Phillies are a fun wild card team. I think they're a good regular season team. I just don't know how that ends up, looking in the playoffs. I will say that Nola and Wheeler is about as good as you can get
That's
to
what I was
start
going
a
to say.
series.
Yeah.
So with that, they could beat any team, but I still think that the Braves, if they ended up in a series against the Braves, the Mets, the Padres, or the Dodgers, I still think the Phillies would lose that series.
Yeah. It's interesting, though. You square off against the Padres. It's a best of 3, right? So you got Nola versus Musgrove. That's going to be fun.
Yeah,
That could be anybody's game. Wheeler versus who do you throw in game 2 for the Padres?
would it be Darvish?
Darvish. Yeah, it's an interesting one
Here's
too.
what I'll say. They're a really good wild card series team. Like in that 3-game series, I do like the Phillies a lot. I think
Don't like him in 7.
I don't like him 7, and I don't like him in 5 after having to go through that wild card series. If they then had to play the Dodgers or the Mets, who are just resting, then I suddenly it's like Scherzer versus Ranger Suarez game 1 or something, and
Yeah.
or DeGrom versus Syndergaard.
Yeah,
But
no, that will be a problem. But I'll tell you what, and you might not like this, and this I promise this is not Mets hate, but the Braves might be my pick out of the National League. Dodgers aside, because the Dodgers are a joke, and it's just they're going to get Dustin May back, who looks spectacular. But to avoid the very obvious favorite of the Dodgers, I think the Braves can pull it out of the National League again this year, and I think we could see a World Series rematch. Is that crazy for me to say that I think the Braves could top the Mets in a 7-gamer?
here's the one thing that I would say is a little bit crazy about that. If you go to the head-to-head this year, the Mets have won 8 of 12.
Sure.
And I think that the interesting thing about the Braves, if you look at their season, they are dominating sub 500 teams. And I'm pretty sure they have a losing record against teams over 500. So how much do we believe in that? Do we think that this is just kind of a front-running team that can feast on bad pitching, put up their home runs? That's why they sweep all these series against bad teams. But when they face a Dodgers or a Mets, maybe they get exposed a little bit. They have some guys with some high strikeout rates. I don't know. I feel like this Braves team has to show a little bit more over the final stretch of the season against the better teams, because so far this year, if you look at the splits, it really has been they're just destroying the bad teams in the National League. And there's a lot of bad teams in the National League.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And I think what really has put me over the top here with this team is the emergence of a Michael Harris and
Yeah.
having an elite defensive center fielder that can really just do it all for you. And now the bat has really played as well. You're seeing William Contreras just not really completely slow down at all. Like that's a legitimate bat for you as well. Matt Olson starting to heat up. I really, and then of course we've talked about Austin Riley. I don't know what I just look at them, and now Vaughn Grissom's a piece. It's going to come down to the pitching, right? And I do like what they have going on there. Max Fried I'd put him up with anybody, but my concern is when you go up against Scherzer and DeGrom, how are you going to combat that? My counterpoint to my own point would be Fried has been spectacular. Spencer Strider, I think I would trust. I know the Mets took care of him, but I would trust him on the big stage from what we've seen already. And then Charlie Morton, he's been much better since a really bad start to the season. And that guy's the best game 7 pitcher ever. So the Braves, I think, are still a sleeping giant here. And I say sleeping just in regards to the respect that they aren't quite getting. I don't know. I feel like people aren't putting them in the same bucket as the Mets and the Dodgers. And I think they should be.
Yeah, I don't think that they're far off from them. I do think that the Mets and Dodgers are better. And I think this is a big series for the Braves this week. And as we're recording this, or as people are listening, game 1 will have already happened. It'll be Carrasco versus Strider. We'll see what happens there. But this is a huge series for the Braves. After losing 4 or 5, they're at home for 4. You know that they're trying to go out and win 3 of these games. And the thing that I think it makes this series interesting is you once again see the separation for the Mets in that you got Carrasco Strider game 1, Taijuan Walker Morton game 2. Those are fairly even pitching matchups. But then you got Scherzer versus Jake Odorizzi, and then Jacob deGrom versus, it seems like, either Max Fried coming off the concussion or a spot starter. That's where the Mets have an edge. If they can win one of the first 2 games, they got the Scherzer deGrom, hammer that they can put down on the Braves to close out this series.
Man, I'm excited for this one because I think it's going to be a really good pulse now to get an idea of where everybody's at. And we know we said that last week. Now, all of a sudden, the Braves add Von Grissom, and now he looks like he could be a dynamic piece for them. Raisel Iglesias, I'm excited to see how he can shorten ball games. One note on the Phillies, too, Corey Knebel set to hit the IL. That stinks because their bullpen is better, but that was a big guy for them after a slow start, was really good. And now on the Nationals front, not a ton to write home about there, but they are calling up CJ Abrams, which is great because when the Nationals come to town, at least there's a little bit more to watch. CJ Abrams is one of the more exciting and dynamic young players in the game, one of the centerpieces in the deal for Juan Soto. Glad to see Abrams brought up and get some opportunity to just get reps and just get comfortable to the big leagues, because I think he's going to be a menace in the NL East for a long time. I think we're going to get used to watching CJ Abrams steal bags and run all over our teams for a long time.
Yeah, and I know he did debut with the Padres early this year, right?
Yes.
But that did not work out great. But now you get to play
Yeah,
carefree.
high pressure, like, give us quality at bats. We're trying to make the playoffs. You're gonna bat after, Machado and all of these loaded bats in our lineup. Like, no, now you're just on a loose environment, relax, learn, develop. It's all good. And I think that's going to be a really good environment for CJ Abrams to just continue to get better and continue to progress. So Nationals get a little bit more watchable. The Marlins, we'll see if they promote any other guys. They kind of don't really have any, other than Gerard Encarnacion, who I think we could see probably pretty soon. But it's three teams right now in the NL East, and what's cool is these three teams have probably never been closer all season than they are right now. So we're gearing up for a nice little final here.
We are. We got big series to start out the week. Mets Braves weekend. It'll be Mets Phillies. And we'll be covering all of that next week on the state of the division for the NL East on Tuesdays. Make sure you're following our YouTube channel at State of the Division and also our podcast feed as well. We'll also be writing articles that go along with all these podcasts throughout the week.